What if I told you we were all wrong about the GR Supra? Back in 2019 when this car was first announced, I was outraged just like everybody else. After having the FT1 concept shown around and pipe dreams of a 3JZ, to find out that the new Toyota Supra was manufactured in Austria and just a rebadged Z4 on paper was rather frustrating. However, as the Supra has been out on the market for 5 years now, I think it's safe to say that we are all pleasantly surprised, at least those of us who weren't BMW fanboys beforehand, with just how well this car is holding up and how well it holds a candle to all of its predecessors. That's ultimately what I'm here to talk to you about today, is why I believe the Mark V Supra is well on its way to earning the Supra nameplate, and why exactly I bought my manual Supra in the first place. But before we dive into all the capabilities of the car, I want to take you on a quick history lesson. This is where I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Toyota has a long history of partnering with outside brands from other countries to develop their sports cars. This didn't start with the GR86 or any of the recent stuff that we've seen. It really started with the 2000 GT back in 1965. Toyota partnered with Yamaha and held them responsible for both the engine and chassis design of this car, and this started a relationship that we still see the benefits of today. After the 2000 GT didn't do so well, they parted ways for a little bit. Then sometime in the late 70s, Toyota wanted to make another sports car, but they wanted to do it cheap. So they took a Celica, put a somewhat powerful inline-six into it, and called it the Celica Supra. And it wasn't very good, and Toyota knew it wasn't very good. They didn't know what to do about it. So this is when they called upon their good old friends back at Yamaha, as well as a new face in town, Lotus. That's right, for the Mark II or the A50 Supra, it wasn't even really designed or engineered by Toyota. They called upon Yamaha to refine their inline-six and have it make more horsepower. Ironically, they named this refined inline-six the M-Series engines. And then they called upon Lotus for the chassis. And it was thanks to this collaboration that the Mark II Supra was renowned as one of the best value sports cars for the money of the time. And really, this is the car that put the Supra nameplate on the map. And while yes, with the GR Supra today, we are talking about a totally different situation, I think that it's just worth pointing out that the foundation of this car, the first good one, was a collaboration car. And from there, the rest is history. They took what they learned from the Mark II and made the Mark III, and then eventually, of course, the Mark IV. The childhood hero, the one everybody wants, what the super kids salivate over, came with 2,000 horsepower factory, is the car. Except in the late 90s, it wasn't. Thanks to a whole bunch of mumbo-jumbo going on in the world, the Mark IV Supra had climbed to a relatively unreasonable price for what it offered at the time. And despite slowing sales figures, Toyota continued to improve the car, with some of the best versions coming in 1997 and 1998, with those also being the fewest years sold. Eventually, the Mark IV Supra was just killed off for the American market, with most buyers at the time saying they'd rather buy 911s or souped-up Shelbys or just about anything else for the money. Now again, I'm not saying the GR Supra is exactly the same situation, but I'm getting some deja vu here. With this deja vu, it's weird. It's like a combination of the whole Supra history in one car. Not only is the GR Supra today a collaboration car, much like the Mark II was, but it was also hated at launch, kind of like the Mark IV was. If you look at these graphs here, it's actually crazy how similar the Mark IV compared to the Mark V sales figures are. While this doesn't exactly hand it the Supra nameplate, at least just does give it some grounds to exist as a car in the first place. Now that we've got that out of the way, I want you to do what I did when I bought my car. Ignore the badges. Step back and look at this hunk of metal for what it's supposed to be, a performance vehicle. And when you start to do that, it's hard to argue against not only it being a fantastic successor from a performance standpoint, but also from a spiritual standpoint. Starting again with the most important part of the Supra nameplate, that 3-liter inline-six. Now, I do understand the skepticism around the B58, first being a BMW motor, and secondly being an aluminum block when the 2JZ was an iron block. Now, I'm not saying I'm a pro engine builder either, but for anyone shooting for reasonable power, the block material doesn't make that big of a difference. What does make a bigger difference is the actual internals, and both the B58 and the 2JZ, when put on paper, hold just about the same amount of power. I will admit, however, the engines do have slightly different characteristics. The 2JZ was known to be a little bit laggy laggy and hit like a freight train once boost came on, whereas the B58 with its 20 years newer timing system and twin scroll turbo has virtually no lag and still makes more power. It is just a futuristic version of what the 2JZ would be. It still gives you that terror, it's just a little bit more predictable. Again, if you ignore the badges and line all of the engines that have been available in the Supra up together, starting with the base 2.6 liter found in the original 79 Supra, moving on to the Yamaha revised one, then of course to the 1J and the 2J, I believe the B58 makes perfect sense as the next step in the evolution. Moving on now to the chassis and how this car handles. It is not a Z4. I can confidently say that. I have had the privilege of driving both, and it does feel radically different. Granted, my reference point is after the 2023 changes, because of course mine is a 2023 manual. Regardless, from what I understand about chassis though, when you take a convertible and make it a fixed roof coupe, in extreme handling scenarios, the results are going to be vastly improved. Not only that, but the stripped out interior of the GR Supra makes it feel more race car and more connected than its Z4 counterpart. And I am happy to report that the GR Supra feels like a thoroughbred. The sensation of the car communicating with you, giving you bits of information here and there and expecting you to use that information and extract the most from it while barely being in control. While at the same time never doing anything you don't expect it to, allowing you to dance that line of understeer and oversteer. It's just exactly what you want out of a sports car. Once again, coming back to that statement of ignoring the badges. When you ignore the badges on the chassis of this car and the engine combined and the overall driving experience, it feels like Supra improved. The chassis almost feels like they went back to the Mark II Celica inspiration of a very lightweight and smaller vehicle, but they took the Mark IV inspiration of just a massive inline six that can handle stupid power beyond the factory limitations. And if you look around, that combination is getting hard to ignore. With every new sports car having hybrid assist, with every new sports car killing off the manual option, with every new sports car being a 4-cylinder turbo, the fact that you can buy a sub 3,500 pound coupe with an inline six that is capable of making near 1,000 horsepower without being opened with a manual gives it eerily similar vibes to the Mark IV Supra and Mark III Supra legends that we've all heard. And if you're still not convinced after those two discussions, I get it, but there's one more thing about the GR Supra that I believe will make everybody come around to it. And that is the legacy that it has built and will continue to build over the coming decades. We all know Mark IVs are basically untouchable from a price point. 9 times out of 10 when you see a street racing video on Instagram with a Supra, it is a Mark V or a GR Supra. And now when you look at Fast and Furious movies, you are seeing GR Supras. When you look at video games, you are seeing more and more GR Supras and less of the previous gens. There's going to be a whole generation of kids that grows up with this being the main Supra that they have access to. There's going to be a whole generation of kids that know this as the Supra that ruled the streets. And this is exactly how the Mark IV Supra gained such a cult following in the first place, was these street racing videos, these Fast and Furious movies, these video game titles, and all these memories of crazy moments with that car. And the craziest part about it is, the Mark V Supra is going to have an eerily similar fate to the Mark IV as well. Hopefully I'm not the first one to tell you this, but 2025 will be the last model year for the BMW Collab Supra, the Mark V as we know it, and it's pretty much all but confirmed that the next generation Supra, if it's even called that, will be a 4-cylinder hybrid of some sort. And I mean, call me a doubter, but I believe this will spell the end of crazy horsepower Supras and crazy modified Supras, at least from a drivetrain's perspective. This leaves the Mark V poised in a perfect position to become what the Mark IV was all over again. A crazy sport coupe made by Toyota that could never possibly be recreated despite the demand that will come. And ultimately, in hindsight, I'm pretty sure this is what forced Toyota's hand to make this BMW Frankenstein car in the first place. They knew this would be their last moment to put out an inline six, and they didn't want to spend billions making their new own inline six that would eventually be discontinued shortly after anyway. They took a chance at pissing everybody off, just like they did in 1993, by attempting to build one of the most capable sports cars within the constraints of their time. And just like from 1993 to 1998, from 2019 to 2025, we thanked them by not buying it.